Guys, does everybody have a packet? All right. Okay, you guys, I need you to put yourselves in groups of 3 and kind of put your desks together, so because you're going to need to manipulate. I'm fine with that. All right. So before we go on, okay, guys. First things first. So my name is Anna Lunam. 2 N's. Last name. I always thought it was very easy to spell until I chose it and gave up my maiden name. Big mistake. Anyway, L-O-O-N as in Nancy, A-M as in Mary. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want you to look at the Drive for 5 vocabulary and see if there's anything there, any of those terms that you don't remember. So please look at those. Just circle any ones that you're not sure of the meaning. The vestigial organs are ones that still exist but have no apparent function. Like vestigial, okay. All right, so one that's come up a couple of places is vestigial. Vestigial refers to structures, organs that still exist in an organism but have no apparent function. So there are some snakes that have vestigial hips bones and little leg bones. They don't really stick out, but the bones are in there. Whales, same thing. Okay. What about in humans? Our appendix.
Our pinkies. I feel like someone said something about a pinky wisdom.
Wisdom teeth? Yeah. All right. The other one was allopatric and sympatric speciation. Okay, so you know the term speciation? Okay, so there are two ways that new species arise, and they can usually fit into one of these two categories. So, allopatric speciation, this occurs because the population is geographically split, isolated by a river, by a mountain range. Something splits the two populations, and if the selective pressures on either side of the river or the mountain vary, then that can lead to enough differences in the populations that they become separate species. Squirrels on either side of the Grand Canyon. Two different species now. Sympatric is when a new species arises and there's no geographic separation, it's within the population. In plants, this can happen frequently with uneven division of cells during meiosis. So you have an abnormal gamete and you get extra sets of chromosomes. That can lead to a new species. In animals, I think this is a little bit easier to comprehend. There's a population of fish in Lake Victoria in Africa, and the species of fish is a chiclet, and there were two colors. Right? There was an orangey color and a bluish kind of color of the fish, and they began selectively mating. So females would only mate with males that were the same color. My boy, well, how does she know what color she is? Anyway, that was happening, and the populations actually started to diverge genetically because of that sexual selection. Then, Lake Victoria became very polluted. You couldn't tell what color they were. I mean, they couldn't see because the water was so polluted. So now, that was heading towards sympatric speciation, but now, with the pollution, they're heading back this direction. Does that clarify that? Questions? Any other terms? We're good with everything else? All right. Turn your paper over to the very back, the blank sheet. Very last page. It should be totally blank. We're going to take a trip through the woods. Never mind. All right. And as you go through the woods, we're all starting at the same place, but there are different paths to go through the woods, okay? And every time you take a turn to go down a different path, so we're going to all start out we're entering the woods at the same place. Okay. And there will be a fork in the road. You can choose to go left. You can choose to go right. Okay. At every turn, there's somebody there and they're going to give you a stamp. Okay, and that stamp will have a shape on it. So every turn, and you're all going to come out of the woods out here. And your card that you got and you went through the woods will have a certain number or kinds of stamps. All right, is everybody following me? Okay, look at your cards. You have to use these cards and kind of figure out the directions that were taken. And mine are all messed up, so I have to come around and give you additional ones. I'm adding some. So start kind of putting these together in some kind of arrangement. So look at the cards and see what stamps are on them. So what stamp did they get? So what stamp did they get as they entered the forest? Circle. Did I give you guys one of these? All right. So entering the forest, they all got a circle. All right. They come to this first choice. Okay. What stamps could they possibly? Is there something that's going to separate whether or not they went this way or that way?
Square and a diamond.
Square and a diamond. Okay. So go from there and draw. So you could have if you want to work on just one piece of paper. Okay, there are lots of ways that these individuals, and each card, you guys, each card is a person that went through the forest, picking up stamps as they go. So there are multiple. There's no one solution, if you will. Okay, so divide them up. Divide them up. Right. Okay. So obviously these all go together. So you'll start off with your line, just like I did. They all got a zeros. They all got the circle stamp. And then the second stamp they got was either that or the diamond. So you have two groups. Right? Well, they all have a circle. So what will separate them?
These two only have
Okay, so
triangle and square.
So these ones this, those three stamps.
So this one is the original.
Right. All the way through the forest, and on that.
But then this one is brings over this, and this brings over this.
Right, okay, so what I'm saying is, when you do that, when it took that turn, nobody else took the turn.
Right.
It's not easy. I don't know what the
So it went all the way through, and all the way
row we have right there. Except that's one of the three.
You're finished? So you're on the right track. So on that first, it's split. So when they get through the forest, you have all the cards representing the people that went through, and the cards with their specific stamps. Okay, so so with this branch, some of them went left, right, and they picked up a diamond. That was the stamp they picked up. All the others went right and picked up a square. Are there any individuals that got through the forest with only these two stamps? Yes? So they go all the way through the forest, and they have, their card will have just the circle and the diamond. They didn't take any more turns. Alright, what about this one? This is a square. Were there any that got all the way through the forest with only two stamps?
Yes.
All the way through the forest, and they came out, and their card will have just the circle and the square. Okay? On this one, so look at your cards. Came in, got a circle, made a turn, got a diamond stamp, made another turn, and what did it pick up? Picked up an arrow. Okay. Did it go all the way through the forest with just the arrow and the circle and the diamond? Okay. It goes all the way through the forest, and its card, circle, a diamond, and an arrow. And it picked up that arrow stamp right here.
Yeah.
Okay, were there other individuals that went through and got a circle and a diamond? So they had to take a turn to get that moon, right? Is that all it has?
Yes.
So it goes all the way through. It picked up a moon when it took that turn. So it has a circle a diamond, and a moon. All right. Did any others take this path?
Circle, diamond, moon,
And a cross. Okay. So what had to happen? It went this way: circle, diamond, moon.
There's got a branch off the moon.
There's got to be a branch off the moon. Did it get all the way through with those? So it comes out of the forest with a circle, a diamond, a moon, and a cross. It picked up the cross stamp right there. Okay? You guys following? Okay, do the other side. On your own.
Everybody has circles.
I'm sorry. You got it?
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I want to see the card. What stamp do they give out in the forest? Where are you? Do we have a better diagram now?
Yeah, I didn't draw any squares, but I used
Questions? Know who came through with stamps and how they got there? All right, so what you end up with, what have you just created? It's a cladogram. And what we're looking at here, not a pathway through the forest, but we can look at this instead as evolutionary time. Going from here, older, to present day. And those stamps are traits. Okay? And I like using this because I think it helps you understand the process of what cladograms are actually representing. We okay? All right. So next, you're going to write an FRQ. We're still working in groups. And we're doing part A. This gets a little trickier because we're having to interpret a data table. I'm going to turn off the light so that evolution of a species is dependent on changes in the genome of the species. And there's your bold word. Identify 2 mechanisms of genetic change and explain how each affects genetic variation. So you've got 2 things to do here. If you flip the page, you have a place to record your answer. So talk with your group and kind of brainstorm. What are some mechanisms of genetic change? What can lead to genetic change? So just list them.
It's like it's a metaphor for
The square root of like 60 years.
So anyways,
You guys, you might want to use your vocabulary list. The key word here is mechanism. Good. Any others? I know you are only asking. More? Right? There you go. Come up with any others? So that then, if you've got a list, then you can go on that list and come up with the best one. Okay. Come up with any others? Sexual selection? Mechanisms. Keyword. Look at your. What you guys come up with? Okay. Now that you have your list, you need to determine which 2 you can use to formulate the next part of the question. So put a star beside the 2 you think you could build the strongest response. And this is a skill you need to develop to answer multiple answer the free response questions. Is the first thing that comes to your mind might not be the best one for you to address to answer the rest of the question. So that's why you should jot down ideas, because thinking of one might lead you to the other. Now, which two? And what do you have to do next? So you had to pick two, and then you had to explain how each affects variation. So look at your list, and which two can you use to come up with your best explanation? Okay. Go ahead and jot down some ideas there. For mechanism 1 and mechanism 2. Let me know if you have any questions.
Me too.
Artificial selection is
Right.
strictly one of
And you don't have to write a full sentence there. You can just, what would you want to include in your response? And you guys feel free to discuss it with each other.
everything. Yeah.
Or what do you come up with? And? No, because it's influence who comes right. So it's not human impact, but that's human making manipulation. What else did you come up with? Reputation? Did you do that one? So do you see where creating the list first helps? I would, the more specific you are, the easier it is. So I would not try and address both.
If you're some kind of supplement with only genetic drift and nothing else, could you use the founder effects and the bottleneck effect as a
Right, any questions? Very quickly, what kinds of things need to be in your response?
How it affects variation.
Right, so you need to explain how it leads to variation. What else?
You explain like what it does.
What it does? How it happens? Talking about the offspring? That's awesome. Okay, let's move on. Wait, is that the real? Okay, so we have a little few more minutes where we can work on this. Any questions on this? Don't you guys feel okay, comfortable writing? Okay, let's move on to the next part where it asks you to draw a phylogenetic tree. And students have trouble here. I'll leave this up so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. So here you are to sketch a phylogenetic tree. There are some key points in looking at this data. What do you need to recognize? First of all, there's a key piece of information here. What is it? Okay. Your command term, yes. What do you have to do? You have to draw a phylogenetic tree using what? Using the information in the data table. So you're to draw a phylogenetic tree that reflects the evolutionary relationships of the organisms based on what? The differences. That's huge. Sometimes you will get a chart showing the differences. Other times you'll get a chart that refers to the similarities. You'll get two totally different trees. Okay, so here we're looking at differences. Now, what's the relationship between, or what's the connection between the differences and how closely related they are?
The small amount of differences come closer to
Right, so fewer differences means they're going to be more closely related. So on our phylogenetic tree, which two are more closely related? This and this, or this and this? These two. Okay? So we know which two are most closely related here. The horse and the donkey. So that branch will be the shallowest. And that's one of the things I always look for first. What's another thing that you might want to look for and notice? You're looking for the fewest differences and the most. So if you're drawing a tree, what's your confidence level like on it? Do you think you could draw a tree right now, or do you need guidance? Guidance? Okay. So,
Cute little bear.
That's adorable.
Thank you.
What's the difference between a phylogenetic tree and a phylogenetic?
they're often used interchangeably. Phylogenetic cladogram will almost always have lines and angles. Phylogenetic tree may have one. All right, so you're going to have, you want, and I'm going to draw it cladogram style. What are we going to put on these first 2 points?
Horse.
Horse, where do you want the horse?
the right.
And the snake where?
To the left.
Why?
Because it's the outlier group.
Most
That's the most-
Right, it has the most differences, so the snake's going to be way over here. Okay, what piece of information would you like to use next? The donkey. Okay. How can you use that piece of information?
Put it next to the horse, a little split.
our donkey. And this shows that, if you look back here, they're about equally related. According to what I've drawn, they're about equally related to the snake. Is that confirmed with the data? About 20 and 21? That's pretty close. So 20 differences, 21 differences, and then there's one difference between these two. So you can look for data to confirm what you're drawing. All right. Now you just have the chicken and the penguin.
They're closer to the horse and the donkey than to the snake.
Okay, closer to the horse and donkey than they are to the snake. So, you draw it. And things that you need to pay attention to. Things you need to pay attention to are how closely related they are to each other. So the chicken and the penguin, and you said they're more closely related to the horse and donkey than they are to the snake. So where are you going to put your branch?
Behind the donkey. It's like closer down to the donkey.
Draw it on your paper. Let me see.
Well, I did it like for
Okay, so they go from that's the number of differences. Okay.
So the bigger the number, the further apart they're
Right.
And so the horse and donkey, there's only one difference. What about the penguin? So they're going to have a pretty shallow how about their relationship between the horse and the donkey and the snake? Are they about the same? Yeah. So look at the chicken.
Like that.
Okay, so choose. But you made it just Yes.
We know what it is. Wall, right
They literally break the chicken off the chicken off the door. And then I would break the snake off from the penguin. It's not a
Equally related to the chicken. They all exist in this page. Okay, so start with a line, draw one line and put one of them on there.
I'm just like,
Alright, so if you're still struggling with this, I want you to draw a line and put at least the chicken or the penguin on it. So I'm going to draw a line here and say this is a chicken. Okay. Now all that's left is that penguin. Look at your data. A tendency that I noticed was to do this. This point right here, when you're interpreting cladograms, this represents a shared common ancestor with the penguin and equally related to the chicken, the donkey, and the horse. Okay? That's the key in interpreting phylogenetic trees, cladograms, is those branch points, just like when they got stamps going through the forest. How much do they share? How much do they have in common? Or, in this case, the fewer differences. So does this support the data? Is the penguin, what would the data table look like if this was an accurate cladogram? These numbers in relation to the penguin would all be very similar. So if you look at the penguin, all these numbers would be within 1 or 2. But they're not. Look at that. So the penguin is much more closely related to the chicken than it is to the horse and the donkey. So how are we going to depict that on this? Right, so we cannot have this line because it's not equally related. And we put the penguin here. Could these be rotated around this branch point? Yes. Okay, now the rest of the question is explain the relationship of the organisms. How do you explain this relationship?
the donkey and the horse are closely related.
Okay, in general. So we have this data. How do we use this data to determine relationships?
The horse is all an ancestor.
We don't need to mention any specific organisms here. It's just in general. How do we determine? Right. The fewer the differences, the more closely related they are. All right. Now, based on the data, identify which organism is most closely related to the chicken. Is that an easy point? Which is most closely related to the chicken? And yes, it's the penguin. You get another point if you can explain. So, why? Right. So the chicken and the penguin, there are only 3 differences in the amino acid sequence in cytochrome C. It has the fewest differences. Any questions? You will have numerous cladograms or phylogenetic trees in the multiple choice section and probably on the free response, where you have to possibly draw. One thing that is interesting about the exam though is they'll often give you the framework of the tree. And you just have to, so they'll draw this and you just have to fill in the organisms. Not always. They didn't on this one. But sometimes it's there, and all you have to do is fill it in. Okay. This is a huge part of the exam. Is interpreting phylogenetic trees, drawing them. On the multiple choice, you may be given some information, and then you have to choose which phylogenetic tree best represents the data. Questions? Are you feeling okay with this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So next, in part C, it asks you to describe 2 types of evidence and discuss the strength of each. So you're looking at right here. So here we're comparing proteins. Okay, so other than the comparison of proteins, brainstorm, write down as many pieces of evidence as you can think of as a group. Just write them down on your paper. And you're looking for evidence that can be used to determine the phylogeny of organisms. Go. As many as you can think of. What do we use? What else can we use besides comparing proteins? So think about evidence. What would you do if you were given 2 organisms or a group of organisms and you were asked to determine how closely related they are? What would you use? Brainstorm. What do you have? One. Good. What do you guys think? Right, so anatomical, physical, anatomical. What else?
I guess you was still new, like, at the I don't know, it's kind of an experiment, like they have the enzyme that breaks down.
Okay, don't overcomplicate. You just think simply, like you said, physical similarities. Similar ancestry. So, how could this be used? What is the strength?
The following students please report to the labo table. Nicholas Wagasak, Shamaria Hughes, Reagan Sunday, Caitlin Curion, Bella Atkins, Sarah Collins, Jacob Cookie,
I
Caitlin
kept walking in
Boutwell,
front of it.